Hello and welcome to my presentation for the Inusharts Conference 2021. My name is Arnika Yasmin, a final year student of the French Studies Department, Universitas Indonesia. I will be presenting a research entitled The Influence of Balanced Pork Movement on the Sexual Violence Phenomenon in France with Mrs. Airin Miranda as a corresponding author. Through this research, I hope that more awareness is raised about the importance of collective actions to voice a sensitive issue, and one of them is sexual violence.
Sexual violence and harassment are an issue that often experienced by many women, including in France. However, the number of recorded cases of sexual violence in France is not comparable to the number who report to the authorities. From 2016 until 2018, the average number of sexual violence victims reached 294,000 per year. Despite the massive case recorded, 80% of the victims did not report their experiences to the authorities. Many of the victims didn't receive direct treatment because many cases were not taken seriously by the French police.
In order for survivors of sexual violence to have the courage to voice their concerns, social media campaigns are effective to gather voices and to share them to the wider community. One movement against sexual violence that has successfully trended on social media in France is the Balanced movement.
This movement is originated from the Me Too movement in the United States that started from the case of Harvey Weinstein in the American film industry. While in France, this movement began from a French journalist named Sandra Muller who shared a hashtag on Twitter to voice sexual harassment in the workplace. Not only did the hashtag become a trend on Twitter, there were also manifestations and demonstrations that aroused the enthusiasm of the French people. This shows that this movement had shown its impact on the French society. Although Balanced had raised the voice of the victims of sexual assault in France, it is important to examine the development of this movement and its contribution to social and political change in France. Therefore, this study will add to the progress of the Balanced movement in achieving its social demands and describing to what extent the movement has achieved success in fighting gender inequality and sexual violence in France. This study uses a qualitative method by John Creswell and the social movement new media theory by Brian Lauder to see the development of Balanced movement in achieving its demands and its social impact. And now we've arrived on the findings and discussions. For interpretive framing, various forms of phrases and expressions used by the victims to tell their experiences using the hashtag Balanced on Twitter. Le Parisien and Libération stated that the recorded tweets of sexual assault complaints using this hashtag has reached 931,240 tweets. The places where aggression occurred the most are workplaces and public streets. In the framing stage, these three issues became the events most voiced by survivors through the Balanced movement. Based on the sample tweets written in various news articles, this movement had an interpretive framing which the survivors of sexual violence or harassment wanted to achieve better conditions for them. This is shown by the way the victims expressed their concern in tweets and the language style they used. The social demands of this movement came in three main problems. First, women want to feel safer at work and free from sexual assault from their co-workers. The second one, sexual harassment in public space is considered underappreciated. Thus, this made the victims voice their concern through social media because it's more effective. The last one is about the incompetence of French legal system regarding sexual violence and harassment. Based on these social demands, it shows that stronger long-term laws are needed to protect the victims of sexual violence and harassment and to prevent such cases happen again in the future. After knowing its social demands, this movement indirectly influences public opinion to take bigger political decisions. On the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women on 25 November 2017, Macron addressed the topic of gender inequality as a front line of his work program after the Balanced phenomenon. Apart from that, Marlène Schiappa, as Secretary of State for Equality between Women and Men in France, drafted a bill against gender-based and sexual violence known as Loi Schiappa and passed on August 3, 2018. a year after the Me Too and Balance Ton Porc movement phenomenon happened in France. This new law strengthens the criminal code for sexual violence against minors and also the first one to introduce sexist insults on the street as a crime, or harcèlement de rue in French code penal. Sexist insults are included in this law with the aim of suppressing sexual harassment on the streets that is often experienced by women. For phase 3 or protest, this movement also built the spirit of the community to join manifestations to support the goal of eliminating sexual violence. For example, the demonstrations that held in Paris, Lyon, Bordeaux, and Marseille. The Balance Ton Porc movement has also pioneered the emergence of other movements that voice issues of gender inequality or violence against women. For example, the hashtag #NoToot movement of social media led to the largest ever anti-violence demonstration against women in France on November 24, 2018. Based on the explanations before, this movement builds people's courage to carry out protest as a form of freedom of expression. This movement finally increases the number of sexual violence reports to the authorities as shown on the table. Based on the discussion and analysis, we have come to the conclusion of this research. Social media has proven to be effective in sharing stories of sexual violence survivors through the hashtag #BalanceTonPorc social movement in Twitter. It is also increasing people's awareness and the realization that sexual violence is a serious political and social problem in France that needed a stronger legislative measure.
We can also conclude that although this movement has succeeded in increasing public awareness of sexual violence issue, there is still no visible decrease in the number of cases as shown in the figure. Therefore, the Balance Ton Porc movement is merely a symbolic movement to open up the voices of sexual violence survivors because the laws that are passed in 2018 haven't maximally reduced the amount of cases in France. For further discussion, the French government must take this matter into account and improve the policy against sexual violence that has been implemented. This is done so that these acts are recognized as crimes that deserve heavy legal punishment.